Welcome to PBS Books. I'm Heather Marie Montilla, the Library Bureau Chief of PBS Books. We are so very glad that you've joined us today. We are here today to celebrate Trailblazer Dr. Mae Jemison, author of her soon-to-be re-released memoir, Find Where the Wind Goes. It seems fitting that we have this conversation during the 100-year celebration of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which enabled women to vote. Many trailblazers. And then it also seems fitting that it's February, Black History Month. Today, PBS Books and ASALH, which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, formally announced a new alliance. We are committed together to highlighting the most important African American authors of our time and provide insights on issues related to diversity. I'm pleased to have ASALH's Executive Director, Sylvia Cyrus, here to share a bit more about her organization. Sylvia?
Good afternoon, and we're delighted to be here with you. I'd like to share some information about ASALH. That's how we pronounce our acronym. ASALH stands for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. It's a lot of words, and it really is powerful and means quite a bit. We were founded in 1915, 106 years ago in Chicago, Illinois. Our members study history, life, and culture, and share that information with teachers and students all across the world. Each year, we set the Black History theme. A theme is what we ask the country and the world to focus on. One aspect, one thought about Black history that can be taken in many different directions. For this year, the theme is the Black family. We want everyone to focus on family traditions, stories, and relatives. And so we have a website that you can visit at www.asalh.org, where you can learn more about programs that we're doing, as well as the fantastic programs that we are doing this year with PBS Books. We study and celebrate history. History is the study of past events and how they impact our lives today. Before Dr. Carter G. Woodson began studying Black history, very little was written about the amazing contributions of Black people. Dr. Woodson was the founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, our organization, when it was founded in 1915. He realized that if the world did not know about how important Black people were, that they could be eliminated and no one would know that they were here and no one would even care. He knew that Black lives mattered. People like Dr. George Washington Carver, who was born at the end of slavery and was an inventor and a scientist at Tuskegee Institute, which is a historically Black college and university, who among his hundreds of amazing inventions created 300 products from peanuts. And I bet you can guess the one that you know the best, which is peanut butter. There were other individuals who were business people like Madam C.J. Walker, who in the early 1900s created a manufacturing company for hair care products and became one of the first African-American female millionaires, or any Black millionaire at all. Similar to the contributions of Jay-Z and Beyonce. They have great musical companies and they also contribute to our life and history. And then there are politicians and people who help us as civil servants, like Robert Smalls, who was a former slave and a congressman in South Carolina. And then there's Vice President Kamala Harris. So we encourage you to study more about our history and join us in more programming with PBS Books as we enjoy today's wonderful, wonderful talk with Mae Jemison. Thank you.
Sylvia, we are truly honored to partner with ASALH to celebrate African Americans' life and history throughout the year. So thank you. As many of you know, PBS Books works with libraries across the country. And the work that we do is basically we work with libraries, many school libraries, many public libraries, and we partner with them to provide these programs. So we thank all libraries across the country who are participating and sharing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for creating dialogue in your communities. Now it is my extraordinary pleasure to introduce Dr. Mae Jemison. Dr. Mae is a physician, an engineer, an educator, a social scientist, an entrepreneur, and a former NASA astronaut. She was the first woman of color in the world to go into space in 1992. Dr. Mae leads the 100-Year Starship global initiatives. She's founded 2 technology companies and a nonprofit called Dorothy Jemison Foundation for Excellence. She was the first real astronaut to appear on the StarTrek TV series, and she even has a Lego minifigure. She grew up in Chicago, attended Stanford University, and did her medical degree at Cornell University. It is my extraordinary honor as someone who has studied the sciences throughout my whole life and as a woman to introduce Dr. Mae Jemison. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so very, very thrilled to have you and to be able to discuss your soon to be re-released book, Find Where the Wind Goes. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm really pleased to be here with you today and to be a part of such a great partnership that you all have, that PBS has created with ASALH. I'm thrilled.
Well, thank you. And before we start, obviously we're going to have a conversation and go into various questions, but I want to encourage all of you out there who have questions as Dr. Mae and I have a conversation to put those questions in the chat on Facebook if you're on Facebook. We want to hear your questions, and there will be time at the end of our session to ask some of those questions. So I always just like audience members to know that. So to start, why did you first write Find Where the Wind Goes back in 2001? And why did you decide to revisit it and re-release it now?
So I wrote Find Where the Wind Goes, and it was focused toward my 16-year-old self, what I would tell my 16-year-old self about my life, and also how it might have impacted, the journeys that I took. One of the things that really motivated me to do this was that friends of mine would see narratives about me where people made stuff up. And it was always, of course, that she was this child that always did what her parents told her to do. And she studied well, and she was not rebellious at all. And they would look at it and say, we don't know who this person is. And so I thought it was really important for me to tell the stories about how I, just some tidbits of stories about how I came to be. So these moments are ones that hint toward the future, that tell a story about who I intended to be, who I knew I wanted to be, which wasn't necessarily a job, but rather the type of person I wanted to be. And I thought it would be as important to do that. Why am I re-releasing it now? Well, first of all, it's an update. It's a true second edition. So it has additional content, right? So we have new content. It also has completely new images. And in fact, the photographs that were in the previous book, they're not there. We actually have illustrations that I helped an artist to conceive some of the events that I talked about, because you don't always have that picture of you doing something that was really memorable, that changed your world. But it was that reason. And then finally, today, as I look around, a lot of what's happening is very similar to what I had to deal with and digest as I was growing up as a teenager. And what do I mean by that? So I was right in the middle of the civil rights movement in the 60s. There was also space exploration was exploding, in the sense of there were so many things that were happening. Science, technology, engineering was right at the forefront of things. We had a really great connection and engagement with fantasy and different kinds of science fiction and media. And at the same time, everyone was declaring their right to participate. If you look to where we are today, space has a new resurgence, it seems like. There's also the whole issue around diversity and inclusion. Who gets to make the decisions, right? Who do you get to be? As well as this whole connection with the world. And then if we look at the pandemic, this connection with the world is about what should our society be in the future? And who gets to make that determination? And so I thought that it would be helpful to bring those back, to bring that back to the forefront, because it's very much like what was happening in the 60s. And it was very much, again, some of those decisions, those things that I had to deal with as a teenager.
No, and I think that's one of the amazing things about this book for me as I read it, because it really, 50 years have gone by since Riot, right? And yet it's and I hope we'll jump into that a little bit more later, because I wanted to more start in the beginning, but it is very surprising how far we've come and yet how far we have not. Yes, in space, the world has evolved in many ways, but we'll get to that a bit later.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, from an early age, you seemed really determined to be a scientist. Even I think there's a story in the book about you as a kindergartner. I have a 4-year-old. So I was thinking just of a little Mae standing up to her, her kindergarten teacher. I wanted to see if you would mind sharing that memory with the audience. What happened?
Well, so one of the things, first thing I'll tell you is I chose my parents well. I don't know how I did it, but I chose them well. And I was the third of 3 children, all of whom my brother and sister are very bright. So coming up, I had to make my way. Right? But I don't remember when I knew that I liked science. I just remember helping my brother and sister with their science projects. And so in kindergarten, when your teachers ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Of course, I was that kid with my hands up in the air. And as she called on the other children, they said policeman, fireman, teacher. When she finally got to me, I said, I want to be a scientist. And she said, don't you mean a nurse? Now, there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. But for me, I took offense because it felt like to me, she didn't believe that I could be a scientist or that I even knew what a scientist was. So being the child I was, I just put my hands on my hips and I said, no, I'm not a scientist. And I was really quite irritated with her. I know now that she was trying to help me choose a career that she believed as a young Black girl growing up on the Southside of Chicago in the 1960s. That this was a career that I could aspire to or accomplish. But that's not who I intended to be. And
well, so as a backup, secondary question then, what advice do you have to a young girl coming up now who's kind of told, oh, well, meaning you don't mean that, do you? I mean, what advice do you have for them about following their big dreams? And I know that's a big question, but
well, I think it's the same advice that I give to anyone, right? Which is, it's about really understanding who you intend to be. Who you intend to be isn't always a job. Sometimes it's the traits you want to embody. So when I think about it, I wanted to be creative. I wanted to be able to explore many things around the world. I wanted to make a difference in life. I wanted to constantly be engaged and challenge myself. What do I tell folks? I think it's usually more you show them, right? Which is also part of the reason that I wrote the book, is to sort of show these experiences. But it's really to understand that you have a right to be involved. Then when people use a term and they say, we need to empower people, we hold a lot of power ourselves, and every day people give it away. To be empowered, to me, means that you have to recognize and do three things. The first is to recognize you have a right to participate. You have a right to be in this universe. You have a right to participate in what the society becomes, what the world becomes. You have to believe that, and you have to own that. Secondly, you have to believe that you have something to contribute. If you don't believe you have something to contribute, then you'll just sit on the sidelines. But understand you have something to contribute. And the final piece is to risk making that contribution. So many times we're afraid that people may laugh at us, we may fail, but you have to risk making that contribution. And that's how you empower yourself. And in many ways, you can accomplish things that you didn't know you could, or that others didn't know you could. And I want to just go back with how that might affect young women. And women in period are different people, but let's particularly talk about girls and women. So many times in classrooms, girls are asked yes, no questions, and girls get the answers right, but they're not asked to elaborate on their answers. Boys are asked to elaborate. So as girls, we grow up many times having to have the right answer, but not asking to pontificate or explore more. And so we always want to be absolutely sure that we have everything, all our ducks in a row before we step out. There's something to be said for that, but there's always something to be said for trying things that you don't know you can do, because that stretches you, that pushes you.
No, I think that the stretching and pushing is a real theme throughout your book. And one of the things I really appreciate about your book is that you discuss the challenges and the roadblocks that you hit along the way and what made you into the person that you became. I know there are things sprinkled throughout your book, but if you could give an example of really a formative event that really made you who you are, just one that's in your book.
I don't know that there's a single formative event that makes you who you are, right? But I think they help you to see who you are. So let me think of something. Sometimes, remember I talked about having a nerve to do something?
Yeah.
So I can tell you, when I was growing up, I was pretty good at school. And I did really well, and I always had science projects. And I thought I was pretty jazzy, you know. I was a sophomore in high school, and I'm thinking I'm pretty jazzy. And I'm talking about a science project. My mother tells me, why don't you do a science project on sickle cell anemia? Now, I didn't know what sickle cell anemia was. I knew it was a blood disease, but that's basically it. And my mother would just challenge me. She would throw stuff out on the table. And she was one of those people who always tell you to go look it up. You got to find out for yourself. And being the kind of teenager I was going to take this challenge up, even if I don't know how to do it. So what was really happened is I ended up calling Cook County Hospital Hematology Laboratory. That's the big Cook County Hospital in Chicago. I called their hematology lab, and I said, may I speak to the head technician? And when he came on, I said, my name is Mae Jemison, and I'm working on a science project on sickle cell anemia, and I'd like to know if you all can help me. This is a cold call out of the blue. And the technician, he asked me a lot of questions about chemistry and things, and he realized I could do stuff. Long story short, I literally ended up doing a project at Cook County with Cook County Hospital head hematology department, having to come up with a new drug, a new compound to test against sickle cell formation. I ended up, as a sophomore in high school, learning about, I'm sorry, a sophomore, junior in high school, writing off to the National Institutes of Health, reading not just college graduate level papers, but papers that scientists were producing out, because the head of the hematology department actually challenged me to do even more. And so I learned all of these things. It was all about taking that risk to call. It meant that I had to do a lot of other things. So I would go from the Southside of Chicago all the way over to the West Side to do this work. But consequently, I got to learn so much about different kinds of equipment, electrophoresis, all these things that I would not have learned in high school. But it also helped me to know that I could understand these things.
That's amazing, right? It's also that initiative and being there, right? You know, getting the right person on the phone or negotiating to get the right person there, that tenacity and persistence. What pushed you to want to become an astronaut? I know that's always something everyone wants to know, you know, what pushed you? And then when you applied, what do you think made you stand out among everyone else?
So we're going to talk about other stuff, because part of what allowed me to do all of this that people know about was because I was rounded and grounded in other areas that would compensate for sometimes you don't get all the responses that you want. Being an astronaut is really simple. I want to go into space. I mean, I didn't necessarily want to be an astronaut. I wanted to go into space. People say that's semantics, but it's not, because I could have waited for ET in a cornfield with aluminum foil on my head, but I didn't think that was going to get me there, right? So I applied to be an astronaut. I assumed since I was a little girl that I would go into space. I assumed because there were so many people, you know, space was just all a part of what was happening. Even though there were no US women in the astronaut program, there were no people of color in the program, I knew that was nonsense. You should have seen me running around, a little 6, 7-year-old kid telling adults, no, that's foolishness. That doesn't work. I don't care. There's no way you can convince me that it doesn't, that women can't do these things. So I wanted to go into space. And simple as that. You know that cold call that I did to Cook County Hospital? It was a little bit mirrored with how I applied to NASA. There's a little bit more. I had a little bit more knowledge and things then, but I literally called down to Johnson Space Flight Center and said, I'd like to get an application to be an astronaut. Wow. No kidding. And they transferred me to the astronaut selection office. And that's where I got my application stuff. There's a little bit more. I had a little bit more knowledge, but it literally was still a cold call.
That's amazing, right? To think, but I do think there's something to be said about cold calling even today, because the truth is nowadays, most young people they just want to email and text. And if you can actually get someone on the phone, it's amazing the magic that can happen. Before we jump into more aspects of your book, I can't go on without showing, you know, one of the things that there is a Lego figure here, and it has your name on it. And I want to know, how did this happen? Did they call you? Is it like when you get a big award, hey, Dr. Mae, we've decided you're it? How did it happen?
Well, just like NASA, this one had more to do with people nominating me. You know, I was going to tell you with NASA, I would have hoped to have said, you know, they found out how wonderful I was and came to me, but that wasn't it. But with the Lego figure, there was a professor in Boston who decided that it would be important for Lego to have women figures and science. And so she designed a Lego set that had a number of women, and it ended up getting, I think it was 10,000 signatures it needed for Lego to really take a look at it. Wow. And I was one of the figures that she included in it. And eventually this came out.
And did you have any artistic license? Did you get to pick colors, or no? What you got is
no, I got to help design my blockhead.
Okay. Well, that is so cool. I don't think I've ever gotten to interview someone who had a Lego figure. So, but obviously, let's jump a little more into your book. You know, obviously, precocious, super determined. You know, your book discusses this tension between curiosity and dignity. And I was wondering if you could kind of delve into a moment in your life that you discuss in your book in which satisfying your curiosity was squarely at odds with your dignity.
Oh my God, there's so many times. I'm trying to think about, I mean, you know, sometimes it's curiosity, sometimes it's when you just want to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I decided I wanted to try out for Anita for All City Chicago West Side Story. And the background. I wanted to dance when I was a little girl, and I bullied, whined, got my mother into signing me up for dance classes, and I was really good. I was a great dancer. I was very athletic, really good dancer, pretty good actress as well, and I did a lot of performing arts and things like that. But I couldn't sing a lick. I mean, I cannot sing. I had a hard time holding a tune, but I love the movie West Side Story. I love the character Anita. And so I decided that I was going to try out for the West Side Story, all city. This is not my high school. These are all the high school students in the city of Chicago. I'm going to try out for Anita. And let's just say that I managed to get included in a callback of about 6 to 10 girls, because they thought I was really, really good. And I had practiced the songs that Anita sang and everything until they changed the song. Let's just leave it at that. They changed the song. But it was sort of, so it's like your dignity is like, hey, you know, all I could do is try out. And hey, I got caught, you know, but I was there. And I got to be in West Side Story anyway, but there are a lot of different pieces. But that whole, you know, sort of satisfying your curiosity or trying for something that you want to do is there. And sometimes, you know, it does not work out, you know, and you have to be able to have a sense of humor about things as well. But I got to learn, I got to find out. So that's fine.
Yeah, I think the sense of humor is so important growing up, right? To be able to laugh at yourself and laugh at when you succeed and laugh when you fail. And it's hard to fail. But if you don't get back up again, right? I mean, I think your story also and your book, it also talks a lot about the theme of tolerance and acceptance. And I wanted to kind of explore that a little bit more too, and how those values of tolerance and acceptance shaped who you are. Because you discuss it in different places, and I think those are also too critical right now for our country, but for young people overall are two important themes for them to understand. So how do you think tolerance and acceptance shaped who you are?
And I will use the term, let's use the term tolerance, and just recognition that everybody is not the same. And recognizing that we will all make mistakes in life, but we do have an opportunity to improve. When I was growing up, I grew up on the Southside of Chicago. Initially, I was in an area called Woodlawn, and it was, at that time, it was a very difficult neighborhood. And it was, you know, primarily African-American. When I was 11 years old, we moved to Morgan Park, and I ended up going to an integrated school. Now, during that time, also with that move, I skipped 7th grade. My 7th grade teacher in where I was at Wadsworth, I was there for like 2 weeks, and she said, you don't belong in 7th grade, you have to go into 8th grade. So she put me in 8th grade as we were moving out to Morgan Park. And so that changed me in the sense that I was now much younger than any of the other students, but I was tall, so it didn't really matter. The other part of that is from when I was a little girl, let's see, 9 years old, 8, 9 years old, my mother had cut all of our hair short in an afro, short, tiny afro, because Miriam Makeba, who was a South African incredible singer. She was recognized United States. She wore her hair very short. My mother said, that's what we're going to do. So this was recognition of who you were. Back then, when that happened, most women, Black women in the United States, would not have worn their hair that way. So all while I was growing up, people used to call me a boy, and that was okay because my mother said that's their problem. That's not an issue. But the reason why I bring that up, because that tolerance, I don't know if it's tolerance, but understanding that people are different. And then afros became the thing that everybody, started wearing. But in my high school, I had lots of different friends. I had friends from, this platinum blonde, short gymnast, science geek with me, my friend Kathy Sharp, another friend Sheila Wong, as well as my friend Linda Bundridge, who was, she was an African-American girl my same age. She had a completely different MO than I did, but we were best friends. So it was this whole thing about recognizing that you have lots in common with different people and being able to allow that to happen.
No, I think that those are wonderful comments. And I know our audience is interested in asking their questions too. So I'm going to ask a few more questions and then we'll transition into audience questions. So if you're out there and want your question answered, please put it in the chat and we will be asking those questions shortly. In terms of, you highlighted in your book that you like to read and going to libraries, is there a favorite library that you remember or a favorite book? And how do you think that impacted your journey, having books and libraries as part of your life?
Oh my God, there are so many books that I like. It's like there's no single favorite book, right? The libraries, I remember when we were living in Woodlawn, I don't remember the name of the library, but we would always go there. Me, my brother, my sister, and I, we'd always go to the library. We'd take books out, and I was rather precocious in terms of reading. It didn't mean I always understood all the nuances, but I could read all the words in the books. But then when we moved to Morgan Park, I used to go to the library there. I was on Monterey Avenue, and I would get a lot of astronomy and other books, and then I started getting science fiction books and reading those. And some of my favorite science fiction books, I think the first one that I picked up that was knowingly science fiction was called A for Andromeda, which was written by Fred Hoyle, who was an astronomer, and it was about coming up with receiving a signal from another galaxy, and it was basically a signal could construct a computer, which then in turn constructed a life form. But before then, I had read A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, but that was just one of them. So she wrote another one called The Arm of the Starfish and The Moon by Night. Each one of them had heroines in them who were very much involved in science, who were very enabled. They were not shy. They weren't awkward or anything like that. No more awkward than any teenager is awkward, but I love those books. And then in high school, I read all kinds of books that were about civil rights movement. My mother would constantly hand me books like the Dahomean by Frank Yerby, which was about a Dahomean prince. And we would get all kinds of books. So it was that wealth of both fiction and nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction, that made a difference and helped me see the world in different ways. It was really critically important to me. These days, even in medical school, I started reading Octavia Butler, who did an incredible science fiction. The first book I read by her was Kindred and others. So there was these incredible people who help you to sort of see the world in different ways.
Dr. Mae, you have broken through so many glass ceilings. which success, and I know this is hard because you've had so much success, but which success are you most proud of?
So I have no single thing I'm most proud of. And anything that I would tell you that like, I'm like, about is not what you think it is. For me, it was literally being able to run several miles without stopping uphill, right? Because I didn't have incredible stamina growing up and I pushed myself to it. That's something that's very personal, right? It's those things that happen when nobody cares to me that are sometimes the most important, where it was just my own self-determination I had to get through. And I know that applies to everything else you do, but those kinds of things are particularly fun. Or I write about in the book, about being afraid of heights, right? And I know it's kind of silly, but being able to get over that fear. And it didn't happen until actually I was in the astronaut program.
Well, I know I have many more questions for you, but I'm going to stop and start to ask some of our viewers' questions. So we have Nina is really interested to know, what is your favorite planet? And at the same time, we have Riley who wants to know, and it's interesting because I know other people asked this question earlier, how did you land when you came back to Earth? And those are two quick questions. And
I don't understand the favorite planet question. I get asked that all the time and I have to make something up every time. I never remember. When I was a little kid, I was fascinated by Venus because it seemed like it was a twin of the Earth, right? In terms of size and being almost in a habitable zone, but it wasn't. So I was always fascinated by Venus. The shuttle lands the Space Shuttle landed like an airplane, unlike the vehicles, the rockets now, where people come back in a capsule and it lands on a capsule with a parachute on the ground. The shuttle landed like an airplane in a runway, which was the shuttle was an incredible advancement in space exploration. Even though now we're going back to the heavy lift vehicles that are a rocket that look very similar to the Apollo kind of vehicles, the fact that you had something that could launch and then come back down and land as an airplane had a very gentle profile, which meant you could take up some incredible equipment like the Hubble Space Telescope and other things.
No, that's more. I did not know that. Another. Kenzie asks, what is a good astronomy book to read? Kenzie is age 8.
So this is not Find Where the Wind Goes, but 100 Year Starship, we did 4 books that were around space exploration. The first one was called, they're from by Scholastic, they're called True Books. The first one is called 100 Year Starship. Then there's one called Exploring Our Solar System, I believe. One is about our sun, and then the other one is about finding new planets, which is really about finding exoplanets, like planets away from our solar system and how that happens. But the Exploring Our Solar System is about all the kinds of probes that found out information about different planets. The other is about our sun and how our solar system was formed. And inside of each one, we also talk a lot about the universe as well.
Do you have any books or are there plans actually to turn Find Where the Wind Goes into a picture book? Are there any plans to take your book or is there a picture book you recommend that's about you and your journey?
No, we're actually going to do that. I was supposed to do that a long time ago, and then you get distracted with Interstellar Flight and other stuff.
I don't know how you find time.
But no, we definitely want to, because there's stories that I need to tell, like about making mud pies. If you ask me what my first science adventure was making mud pies.
Oh, wow.
Right? And how important that is. But I do want to tell those stories because you can't tell them all in one book. And there are these little pieces of things that I think are fun, or even about friends of mine who were actually quite remarkable. But yes, we're actually getting ready to do a picture book, and I have some of the people who work with me have been pushing me all along. And so, yes, we've taken our first foray into illustration, so we're there.
So we'll see you next year then. No.
If not before.
Someone else was wondering if you could talk about the camps you've started.
So the first thing I did when I left NASA was to start a program called the International Science Camp, The Earth We Share. And it was about promoting science literacy. Because every day we have to think our way through the day. And science literacy to me is so important because so many of the critical decisions that we have to make in the world today really revolve around science literacy that everyday citizens have to participate in. Notice science literacy is not about solving, equations like E=mc². It's really about being able to figure out what to do in terms of medications. I mean, just think about the pandemic that we're in right now. How do you understand the information about the effectiveness of the vaccines? We should be able to do that. It's not that you have to be at the same level of epidemiologist, but also the reason why I did the Earth We Share, we worked with 12 to 16-year-olds because that's the age where kids start to fall out of science. And what we decided to do was to make sure that we related science to their everyday lives and that it was experiential. Experiential means that you get to do something, and that's the best way to learn. So we would actually challenge students, 12 to 16-year-olds, to work in groups to solve global dilemmas like predict the hot public stocks of the year 2030, design the world's perfect house, how many people can the earth hold? And they worked in teams with children from around the world. Wow. We had students from Sierra Leone, from Nigeria, from Portugal, from Spain, from Sweden, from Derby, Kansas, Los Angeles, Chicago, and they would work in teams to solve these problems. We particularly were interested in also training teachers in experiential education because if we can help teachers feel comfortable being guides in science, then they're going to impact many more students than we ever could. So we've done the camps all over multiple times, 4-week residential camps. We did a series of camps in Los Angeles with LA Unified School District that were non-residential, where we trained teachers and middle school students there. We've even done camps, one-day camps in different places like Tunisia, where it was done in French. And currently we're working on with a camp and a program in South Africa now that's around awareness around space exploration as well. The reason why I believe in camps and these are important is because it's been shown over and over again, it's exposure and the hands-on that makes a difference. And it's not about the next generation of professional scientists, but it's about people understanding they have a right to participate. And we have actively had a number of the students who went through the camps who had not intended to go into science, decided to go into science as careers, including a PhD neuroscientist.
Well, that's a huge win. And I know those hands-on experiences, right? The problem solving, basically, I just think that having those programs is amazing, an amazing opportunity for any. And are people still able to participate? Are you still running those camp programs?
We're trying to figure out how to do some of them virtually, right? Yeah. But when we do them, because we have kids working groups that aren't necessarily the ones that they always work with or with different folks. The reason it's important, because if you say design the world's perfect house, which we did at 3 different camps, perfect is going to depend on the people who you're in the group with, right? What is your worldview when you decide on the world? So from those different camps, one time the kids decided to design a luxury house. They knew they could design something else, but they decided to design a luxury house. In another one, they decided to design a house that could be built anywhere in the world, prefabricated, and it was circular so that there are issues around prayer and where you should face. you had an opportunity to resolve that. And then another case, they decided that a zero footprint, energy footprint house would be perfect for the world. But in each case, they got to understand that as we make these decisions about technology and design, policies, it really depends on who's involved.
Well, and bringing lots of people together gives different perspectives and richness, that diversity. So that sounds really wonderful, and I hope you're able to enable. I know with time zones, it's probably a challenge, and able to make that happen again. I know there's many more questions than we have time for because we're approaching the top of the hour. And so I wanted to say a few things. One is we've received questions on how can we buy this book? And in the credits, it will tell you, I know IndieBound, I know Bookshop, I know Amazon, I know basically it is my understanding, and Dr. Mae, tell me if I'm wrong, but any bookseller, Walmart, you will be able to buy the book and even pre-order the book soon, and it should arrive by February 23rd. Is that correct?
I don't know how they ship, so I'm not going to
order.
I don't know, so I can't. I'm not going to obligate any of the booksellers about when it's going to arrive. But I know it will be released. It will be in stores by February 23rd. And we will also, and you can pre-order it as well. And so we're really excited about it because we want to make sure that we get a lot of things out. We're going to be putting together snippets of things and maybe even some pictures out of the book you may really like, and we can put them into posters and other things. But it's really about trying to have fun. And what I'd like to say is, no, the stories aren't all about me going into science. We have a range of stories in it. And it'll be fun, but you can get it. Yeah, any books, any of your favorite is your favorite bookseller.
And I do think that one of the things that should resonate to any reader is that they are stories about real life, and then to know that those real life stories were building blocks who made you who you are, who've accomplished so much and are truly a hero to so many and an inspiration. So Dr. Mae, thank you so much for spending the last 45 minutes with us, sharing your insights, your inspirations with us, your challenges, and how you overcame many of them. As we close, it's actually my pleasure to reintroduce ASALH's Sylvia Cyrus to share about our closing song, which is Lift Every Voice and Sing. Sylvia?
Thank you. Lift Every Voice and Sing is known as the Black National Anthem, and it was written as a poem by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson, who was born in Jacksonville, Florida. And his brother set the poem to song. His name was John Rosamond Johnson in 1899. The song was performed by a choir of 500 school children at the segregated Stanton School, where James Weldon Johnson was the principal. And segregated meaning that only Black children could go to that school, white children were not allowed to go. This song was sung on February 12th, 1900, as a part of a celebration for President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And that was a day that Black people and others celebrated way before it was a national holiday. This song, Lift Every Voice and Sing, has a special meaning for African American history and also has meaning for all Americans. It represents a celebration of liberty, remembering our struggles, and it is a hopeful prayer for a prosperous future. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History has a branch or chapter in Jacksonville, Florida, and it is named the James Weldon Johnson Branch. Without further ado, you will hear the singing of that song by one of the choirs from the historically Black colleges and universities. Enjoy.
till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of bliss.
Lift every voice and sing.
Let every voice sing as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
Lift every voice and sing. Lift every voice and sing a song.
Sing a
Lift every voice and sing a song.
facing the rising sun.
Oh, a new day begun. Let us march on. Let us march on till victory is won. Stormy the road we trod, into the chase we strode. Those in the days went on, yet with the steady beat from the weary soul, until the saints for which are gone, sing a song.
We have come, oh we have come, over a way that the tears have been watered. Oh we have come, chanting our path
Wow. The incredible power of song and the amazing images that were shared throughout that amazing song. Listening to the Black National Anthem at the close of this program was really a true highlight of celebration. And I truly think there is no better way to launch our celebration of Black History Month than to have this as the closer, but also to be able to have spoken to Dr. Mae Jemison. Really a wonderful, wonderful time, and we're glad you stayed with us. We appreciate all your questions, and we hope we will see you again. So don't forget to tune in to PBS Books. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.